Well, it's the holiday season and we're all a little crazy. And I can't believe that the Bears still have 3 more games to play. Dan Wiederer, help me through the final weeks of the season.
I've got a Christmas surprise for you before this is finished to help you through the final 3 games of this Bears season. Okay. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, you're right. At 4-10, officially eliminated from playoff contention, it is a continued mess. And we have been here time after time after time to just continue to survey the wreckage.
It's hard because my like drive to ask questions and see what's going to happen is nil, because I feel like we all know what's going to happen next, and we're kind of waiting for that moment when change begins to happen, and then we can get answers to so many questions that we've had about Nagy and what happened over Thanksgiving and how, and that could happen soon, Dan, because now next Monday is the first day that they can let him know that they're not going to move forward with him and start interviewing candidates. That's never been reality before. And so I feel like that moment could come if the McCaskies really are committed to making this change. They can start taking action right away.
So, okay, as you mentioned, the NFL has put in a rule. It's essentially a trial this year where teams with head coaching vacancies, the vacancy has to be there first, can start interviewing coaches from other teams for that vacancy. And so the Bears could start taking advantage of that as early as next week. The issue here is who would be presiding over the interviews for the next head coach. Right. And that's the question that needs to be answered before you can launch into a head coaching search, because you need to know who your general manager, who's your team president. Is it going to be the status quo at those levels, and then you just try to reboot at the head coach position, or are there going to be massive changes? And so here we are sitting and waiting and still having to sit through games. Monday night was the latest example of another game where it was just like, man, even for the Bears, and particularly for Matt Nagy, it seems like the finish line can't get here soon enough. Now, listen, there's some young players that can squeeze some meaning out of this last stretch of games, and they need to continue to have that focus. But boy, watching them play the way they did in front of another national audience with another broadcast crew essentially saying, this is a joke. It's a mess. It's a disaster. It needs wholesale change. At some point, the humiliation gets to be so heavy that you say, let's just get this over with and get on to the next steps.
It was startling, and it grabbed your attention to hear that the booth on Monday night talking so candidly about what has gone so terribly wrong for the Bears, and even saying, like they know, Brian Griese knows the inside and out of that franchise, and so for him to say, I've played for this group and this is what needs to happen here, and the McCaskies pay attention to that stuff. If there's one thing that we've learned over the years is that they are listening, watching, and reading. They are. And they can say that they're not, but they are. Now, will it lead to action? Gosh, I would think at this point it has to, because change needs to happen. I would constitute a coaching change as massive right away. But I do think it needs to be deeper than that. As you've so eloquently written, it needs to be deeper than that. It needs to be like a whole change of like dynamic, and just get fresh voices and get fresh ideas, and don't ruin Justin Fields.
Yeah, no question about it. I wrote it in 8,000 words last week. I was very brief and condensed with the way I wrote it. But yeah, you make a great point. And Brian Griese, one of the things that resonated with me listening back to that broadcast was him saying that the city of Chicago deserves better than this, right? And so I think there is something to that. And let me tell you a little bit about my thoughts on that, because you talk about George a lot of times being very, obviously a very nice man, a guy that everyone respects as a human being. And he tends to value personality traits of the people that work for him. And you understand the fondness he has for Ryan Pace as his general manager. You understand how well liked Ryan is and why he's well liked. And you say, okay, I can see why they would lean towards sort of not wanting to hurt Ryan, right? It's like a human to human interaction. But then you say, boy, when you look at it from that 30,000 foot view, you say the city of Chicago on a weekly basis is having basically their heart torn out, stomped on, embarrassed. And when you have this at-large group, I got an email from a reader that I thought was very fascinating. He said, I'm having a very difficult time teaching my son to be a Bears fan because he associates the Bears with something that makes dad angry, right? And so this is a small thing from the outside world.
Real. That's
right.
Real.
It is real, right? And so like I think of it myself, like my son now is in 3rd grade. When I was in 3rd grade, Dionne, 1985. That's when the Bears won the Super Bowl. And so that's when my love for football, my love for Chicago sports, my love for winning was just like, this is awesome, right? And now you've got this whole generation and multiple generations, really, because it's been so long since they've had any sort of sustained success, that associate the Bears with failing, that associate the Bears with frustration, that associate the Bears with dad being angry in some households, like that reader sent to me. And I thought that was fascinating because that's the widespread reach of, the impact of their failures, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And it is frustrating because I have a hard time believing that it got worse from Trestman to John Fox. This feels worse. And I'm trying to figure out why. And I've been wanting to ask, I'm waiting a little bit, I guess, but I've been wanting to ask Nagy, like, can you pinpoint when it all fell apart? Like what exactly happened? And I don't know that we'll get an honest answer, but gosh, to think back to 2018 and then that just the slow unraveling of everything he was trying to do, and how this year just felt from the beginning, like from their first win in that club dub, just felt so forced and not natural. None of that BU stuff even was there anymore. I don't know where that all went wrong. And it is hard to wrap my brain around the fact that these Bears fans have now dealt with a decade of frustration that has been just continually 1 year worse than the next, or 1 year more frustrating than the next. And then you get a spark like 2018 and there's no follow through. Like that is, to me, that is deep levels of issues that need to be changed.
Well, I can tell you where it went wrong and where it all started. And it was training camp 2019. We saw it and we documented it at the time. The Bears could not get Mitch Trubisky comfortable or unlocked in their offense. And at the time it was like, this is a worrisome sign. That trickled into the regular season. They lose that 100th season opener on primetime on NBC 10-3, and they don't score. And the offensive struggles persist, and they persist, and they persist. And then there's a quarterback change, and another quarterback change, and another quarterback change, and another quarterback change. And the offensive struggles persist and persist and persist. And what you thought was going to be a demanding cleanup process has been a nonstop oil spill, right? They just haven't been able to get it corralled. And offensively, they're still a mess. You would look at Monday night's game, and they actually moved the ball. And yardage-wise, they outgained the Vikings by 200 yards, and yet they couldn't score. When they got in close, they couldn't score. When they had 4th and 1 after a blocked punt with a chance to make it a game, they ran a play that was just discombobulated from the minute they got lined up, and they failed, right? And it's just been that over and over and over again. And so the offensive struggles have been what has taken this thing down. It is shocking, though, just to see how far they have fallen from where they were at the end of 2018 and for what everyone thought was going to be opening in front of them, which was a window to compete for championships, to play deep into January, to potentially go to a Super Bowl at some point for 5 or 6 years. I remember, and I've shared this with our close friend Rich Campbell, standing at the owners' meetings in March of 2019, and Matt Nagy is the NFL's coach of the year at that time, and Ryan Pace is the league's executive of the year. And you're thinking, man, this window is open for a long time. Here we are less than 3 years later, and we're talking about who gets fired first and then what happens behind them. To your previous point about this being worse than Trestman, I don't think that's the case because there was so much turmoil and drama and chaos. And the end of that season, the last 10 weeks of that season were so much more embarrassing and so much more off the rails. You remember the Aaron Cromer incident with Jay Cutler, and you remember Brandon Marshall, contesting a Lions fan on Twitter to have a boxing match. I mean, there was Martellus Bennett.
Sorry, you're right.
There were so many things that were just so much more soap opera about the end of that era. But this one is more, I think, disappointing and more just like disheartening because you thought that something bigger was here and it turned out to just be a mirage.
Yeah, and I do think that because of the frustration, and you're right, you are exactly right, that the end of the Trestman era was unthinkable. Isn't that when fans were really wearing bags over their heads? And it was pretty bad. It was unbelievable. So you're right. This is not quite that bad yet, though. I mean, I feel like that's why they have to make these changes, right? I mean, they've got to do something. And especially because with Justin Fields, I expected, and Tom Waddle talked to me a little bit about this last week, where he was like, I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more from Justin. Well, that's an indictment on the coaching staff, and is he in the right hands? And I don't think anything that's happened with Justin is unfixable. And no. I don't, but I am disappointed that we haven't seen these flashes more consistently. And I know a lot of that's with people around him, whatever, but if he's going to be the reason they win football games, I'd like to see that from go. And that's why I asked Nagy this week, like, is this a detriment to him that he's playing? And that he's playing sooner than they wanted him to, because this was not what Matt Nagy wanted, right? Didn't he want him to sit the whole season? And everybody said, no, throw him out there. And it's just, I mean, this whole year has been kind of discombobulated, but I just want Justin to shine, because I think that he can. I think he's got all the tools to do that. They just have to find the right person to be the GM, and then hire the right person to do that. And then they have to make sure that they're the right mesh for what he can do.
There's no question about it. Justin's got 3 more games to put together something, right? And I think what you're asking for, and what most people should be asking for, is a complete game, right? Like, play 4 quarters of productive offensive football. Everyone got enamored with the second half in Pittsburgh, and it was like, okay, that was supposed to be a springboard, and yet then it was interrupted by injury and a bye and a lengthy layoff, and then he comes back and there's still rust and there's no struggle, and it hasn't been a springboard. It's like you go to jump on the springboard and you just land like a foot in front of the springboard and you miss, right? And so Justin's got to find that again before the season ends. Too many fumbles, too many sacks that he's taking where he's holding on to the ball too long, and it's a 14-yard loss instead of a throwaway, right? Matt Nagy talked about that this week, about, listen, we can't be in 3rd and 17 and expect to be successful, right? You can't get yourself in those situations. Justin has to be better, and we have to be honest with the people out there in saying that. To your point, I don't think any of this is unfixable, and he's going to obviously in a month or so have a new staff and a new system to learn and all those things that can potentially be the repair work for what he needs. But boy, he needs to be better, and he needs to take that responsibility. I think the best news about Justin Fields through all this is that mentally he's tough, right? And he's strong. It doesn't seem like his psyche is cracked or he's frazzled by any of this. I think he knows that he can get better and improve. Now it's just a matter of making sure that every one of these negative experiences you take on becomes fuel for growth, instead of something that sort of makes you doubt and experience that self-doubt about where your career's headed.
And you're exactly right. I don't think he has allowed any of the frustrations to cause him to doubt his ability or what he knows he can do. I think the number one thing he says anytime we talk about a mistake that was made, he's like, he's dissecting it and breaking it down. We talked about this earlier in the season, where he sounds like a quarterback. Things are slowing. He knows where he can improve. And he's like, it doesn't bother me that I missed a throw, because I know that I can make it. And like, that kind of confidence needs to stick with him. But man, his energy is low, Dan. I mean, you can hear it. It's just that the building is draining. And it is, especially when you look at the calendar and think, oh my gosh, we do have 3 more weeks. And how do we just want to finish strong? Like, to what end? Things are going to be so different in literally 3.5 weeks.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the last time we met with Justin in person was the Thursday before the Vikings game, and it was as low energy as he'd ever been before us, right? And that's okay, right? Like, it's okay as a young quarterback to have those days and those mornings where you're just not feeling it, and you go through it a little bit. You also have to not project that, right? Yeah. And I thought that was troublesome to me last week leading into the Vikings game, because it becomes something that as the face of the franchise, it sets a tone for everything, right? And so this is part of Justin's learning process. You are the starting quarterback, the franchise quarterback in one of the largest markets in the country. And so you have to go out there, even if you are feeling low energy, you have to project, hey, I'm up, let's go. We're gonna rock and roll. And it's something as small as a 10-minute press conference is still important, because it's tone setting and it's also message giving to the outside world, right? Totally. And so that's something that I think he's going to have to be sort of schooled on going into the next offseason is, look, this comes with more than just bringing the energy at practice. You have to project this to the outside world that inhibits his belief. The biggest problem on Justin Fields' plate, not by a long shot, but notable. And you noticed it too. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it was like, whoa, that is a guy who just doesn't feel like he wants to be in the building today.
1,000%. And I think what is most startling to me is then I go back and look and listen to press conferences earlier in the season, and that big, bold smile, that swagger, that like, hey guys, I mean, like I understand that losing weighs on everybody, but you're right. That is a tone setting thing for a guy who's going to lead this entire team. And I think that we've seen throughout the season that both sides of the ball look to him, right? Like that there are guys on defense who everybody's looking to him to take the reins and kind of, move forward. And so it's definitely something he needs to pay attention to in the offseason, is just how he navigates that. Maybe that is, as Nagy said, 2-3 years from now, we'll say it's a good thing that he struggled through that rookie season, but maybe that's one of the things that he will learn to do differently in the future.
Yeah. And they're going to have to find sources of energy, right? They're going to have to find a lot of them going forward because this is going to be a full reboot, right? The roster is going to need to be retooled. They're going to be strapped with salary cap restraints. They don't have a lot of draft capital. You're going to have a new regime at some point in the building helping to oversee some of these decisions. And so the guys that are identified right now as the core pieces, those nucleus leaders, they're going to have to be the ones that provide that energy and that spark going forward. I promised you a Christmas surprise toward the end of this episode, so I'm giving it to you. For the first time since September, I am picking the Bears to beat someone other than the Detroit Lions.
Wow.
I am picking a 24-23 Bears upset in Seattle on Sunday afternoon. I feel like the Bears have one game of fight left in them, one game of breakthrough left in them. They're playing a Seahawks team that is struggling mightily. Russell Wilson can't figure it out, can't find it. They're vulnerable. They have the league's worst pass defense, so the league's worst passing offense should have an equal match for once when they go out on the field. The Seahawks are giving up a lot of sacks, so Robert Quinn could come out of Sunday night as the all-time single-season sacks leader for the Chicago Bears. I'm picking this. Chicago Bears 24, Seattle Seahawks 23. Happy belated Christmas, Chicago.
I mean, that would be amazing. Then you come home to host the Giants, right? I mean,
now you're talking about putting together a streak.
Back-to-back, a winning streak to end the season. Dan, I like the way you're thinking because you know I am the eternal optimist, especially at the holiday time. I think that I'm going to have to think about this because I believe you. That's very realistic, especially a Seattle team that's griping about being on an even shorter week than the Bears are. So let's see.
And listen, like they're not used to being here, right? Like they're not used to being this far out of the playoff mix. That hasn't been the case under Russell and Pete Carroll. And so this is new territory for them. It's going to be interesting to see what that crowd's like in Seattle because they're usually a boost, but they may be feeling like Chicago fans are like, man, this is the end of our road here, right? Russell's future's uncertain. Pete's future's uncertain. We're going to miss the playoffs. It's urgent times there in Seattle, and the Bears should be able to take care of that opening.
And here I thought that I was losing sleep because I was anticipating Santa's arrival. Maybe I'm losing sleep because I'm anticipating a Bears victory. Maybe that's it.
Probably not. It's probably Santa's arrival. Santa's got a lot of work to do in your house, I think.
Yes, more than is humanly possible. So bring it, big guy. All right. Happy holidays, everybody. Like, subscribe, and share. Merry Christmas to you, Dan.
Merry Christmas, and thank you for wishing me a happy birthday. I appreciate that.
Oh, I forgot. Oh my gosh, I forgot that fast. Happy birthday, Dan Wiederer. That's what's most important. I should have started the show that way. I forgot.
28 years old and ready to rock.
28 and ready to rock. Well, get a little rest during your big party tonight. Try. Anyway. Happy birthday.
The big party is Thursday Night Football with my son.
Oh, perfect. That's perfect.
All right, take care.